What on earth are the Jags waiting for to make a decision about Shaq Griffin? I'll tell you why it hasn't happened in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars.
You are Locked On Jaguars, your daily Jacksonville Jaguars podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
What up, good people? Welcome again to another edition of Locked On Jaguars. I am the host of the Locked On Jaguars Daily Podcast, Tony Wiggins, and we thank you for making us your first listen because it's your team every day. Also, a quick reminder that we're free on all platforms, wherever you get your podcasts. You get us. You get us without paying for it. That's right. No, nothing hidden. We're right here for you every day available, and we are free. I want to talk today about Shaq Griffin, number 26, right? If you go on social media anytime during football season last year, he was known as 26. That's it. And usually what came behind it was not something good if it came from a Jaguars fan because they were about through with Shaq Griffin. Now, we did find out that he was battling a back injury. Shaq is expected to be released. Something came out last week that early in the week during the combine that the Jaguars were exploring trade alternatives. So we'll get into that and talk about whether or not that's realistic or not. Don't look at me and don't have your lips all puckered up like they ain't trading him. Well, I can explain the scenarios as to why the team is they're at least doing their due diligence. All right. Should surprises be expected in the draft? Yeah, they're going to be surprises in the draft. Nobody knows who these teams are going to be picking, especially your own. There's always something that'll shock you. Last year, I think the shock was moving up for Devin Lloyd and then still drafting Luke Fortner, right? Not Luke Fortner. They did draft Luke Fortner right after that, but then they took Chad Muma. And I think that all three of those things came as a little bit of a surprise. The Fortner deal wasn't a surprise to me. I kind of had a feeling that they were going to go in a direction similar to that. And finally, should there be cautious optimism about the Jaguars? Are we just to assume that they're going to take the next step? This is not, things don't happen chronologically, and they also don't happen in order. Does this mean the Jaguars will be making that next step, that next positive step? I'll tell you why I think it's more likely now than I normally do, and it has a lot to do with a certain number 16. We'll discuss that in segment 3, but first, what are the Jaguars waiting for with Shaq Griffin? To see if anybody's going to bite. And why would anybody bite when there's a draft full of capable, less expensive, younger players with possibly higher ceilings? Well, all of those things are true. But if you listen to the people who are in the know, that if Shaq Griffin gets released, that the market for him will be robust because he's 26, 27 years old, maybe 27, I think. He's played, he's 6'1", 200 pounds, has played an awful lot in the league. He definitely has the experience that teams really, really like. And the other thing is he has something that he can claim is a little bit of a mulligan. There's one or two things, and I'll tell you what they are. One is the fact that every single coach always thinks that, well, we're not going to pay attention to what happened to this other guy, Shaquille Griffin is 28. We're not going to pay attention to, and he's listed at 6 feet, 194, by the way. But we're not going to pay attention to what happened to him somewhere else. If we get him and what we're asking him to do is going to be better than what they did and what they asked him to do. And plus, he had an injury. So who would make, he did have an injury, he had back surgery, but who would make such stand on the table, bang on your chest proclamations about Shaquille Griffin? There's somebody out there that will, because They love veterans. They, especially a team who has a coach or a defensive coach whose job kind of depends on them being good right now or right away. They love veterans. They love guys who have been around. They love guys who have seen it. They love guys that they can watch tape with and who can almost sound like a coach. And if you heard Shaquille Griffin talk in the past, he's very articulate, very smart, very charming and engaging, and he sounds like a coach. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't be surprised one day if he was a coach. But he can talk ball with the best of them, right? Coaches love guys like that, man. They absolutely adore and love dudes like that, especially if they need to win. Whereas when they have a rookie, I know they can mold their rookie up. They can take a rough Ashler and make him smooth and build him in their own likeness. But if you ain't got time for all that, because you might get fired or the pressure's on you to win, you may say, let's get that guy, but we need this guy too, to be a 2-year buffer. The reason why I know there are people that'll stand up on the table for Shaq Griffin, because somebody stood up on the table for Shaq Griffin when he came here. I talked to people in Seattle. In fact, I even interviewed Corbin Smith, who covers the Seahawks and has for a long time for multiple entities, and he does it now with Locked On Seahawks. He told me he wouldn't have signed him either. It's like, yeah, he'll be all right, man. But they're basically, I can't actually remember the exact words that Corbin said, but whatever they were very similar to how a lot of you guys feel about Shaq's performance over the last 2 years here in Jacksonville. Good guy, decent, just almost like can't get right. Especially there was a stretch here between the Washington and the Colts game, man, where it just looked bad. And like I said, if there's somebody out there that wants Shaq Griffin, they're going to make an excuse because of his back. Now, he can always negotiate his salary. I think it's $13 million. He can negotiate and change half of that into a bonus and the other half, the cap hit. So he doesn't have to be a $13 million cap hit wherever he goes. And the Jaguars, reasonably, what are they going to be able to get for him? A day 3 draft pick. I don't think they're going to get much higher than that. But those day 3 draft picks matter when you have a boatload of them and you're trying to move up from, say, round 4 to round 3 or round 3 to round 2. You're going to have to give up a high pick, but then you have to couple it up with maybe 2 or 3 of these late round picks. And there are some teams around the league that do a very good job with their late round picks. Baltimore has traditionally done extremely well. Kansas City, as of late, have done extremely well. So some of those picks have a ton of value to a lot of teams, especially with teams with a lot of really good players that have a lot of high salaries. So they need a lot of really less expensive players. And depending on what they're actually looking for and how deep the draft is at certain positions, it will allow teams to make those kind of deals. Can you imagine a playoff team that needs a corner whose scheme fits better with what Shaq wanted to do? And this is another thing Shaq can talk about. Shaq can go, well, when I signed there, it was the urban staff. So they had these guys on their defense. And then they bring in Doug Peterson and he goes and gets his guy, and they don't run the same defense. So therefore, maybe some of the things that they were asking me to do, I'm not really adept at doing those things the way that I was for the staff prior to that. So every man's trash is somebody else's treasure. And corners who have played a lot of football, it's not something that these teams, don't actually value probably more than fans do. So maybe that's what's taking so long. They know if they want to let him go, they're going to get the instant cap savings right away. But guys that play that position are hard to find in this league. And if he hits free agency, there's going to be a big market for him, then why not try to go ahead and give somebody the rights to him for a late round pick to see if you can handle it now? So my gut feeling tells me ain't nobody going to bite and he's going to be a free agent, but we will see. All right, we're going to get to, should there be surprises or expectations, or should there be surprises in the draft, since all of these mocks are starting to make too much sense and it's easy to put everybody in their slot. Yeah, those mocks ain't going to mean a hill of beans. And yeah, there's going to be some surprises. And yeah, it could come in the first round, especially when the team is not picking at the top of the draft. We'll discuss that and more in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. after I let you guys know about FanDuel. That's right, man. I am so happy that FanDuel is today's sponsor of our show and one of our partners here on Locked On Jaguars and the Locked On Podcast Network. Football might be over, but the midway point of the NBA season, we have just got beyond that, and it's the perfect time to download FanDuel, America's #1 sports book, because new customers get a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app, and it's safe, secure, and easy to use. Then you can bet on everything from the money line to point scores and threes drained. Now, I know I have to look at tendencies when I think of who is going to score more points and rebounds. Also, with these trades that went down, everyone's not ingratiated with their team. So make sure you go and do your homework at FanDuel. Plus, FanDuel lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with the same game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/locked on. That's FanDuel.com/locked on to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of the NBA. And we welcome you here again to Locked On Jaguars, where it's your team every day. And we thank you for making us your first listen. We are always eternally grateful to have you here. If you're new to the podcast, welcome. Come on in, and you ain't new no more. Once you come in and click on, hit the like button, you're good to go. You're good to go. You're vested. No one, you have tenure is what they call it. No one's new here on the Locked On Jaguars podcast once you've been here. So we thank you also for being here. Should there be surprises expected? Yeah, there should be, especially when the team is picking 24th. One, because we don't know what these teams are going to do in front of the Jaguars. Two, as much as we look at some of the draft folks that we really, really trust, shout out to guys like Move the Sticks and to the entire Draft Network crew that I follow, and some others that some of the guys on the Locked On Network are affiliated with. Everyone does a good job, and they really, really try to get it right. But none of them actually get it right. Even the ones that I said, shout out to them. No one gets it right. We just do the best. I don't get it right. The most I ever got right in a mock draft was 8 people. I won a contest with our local newspaper here about 20 years ago. I got 8 people, and I really got saved at the very end because I hit the last 3. I hit pick 31. I hit pick 30, 31, and 32. Isn't that something? Because I matched the teams up with certain players that I thought were going to be on the board. To me, that were just perfect fits, right? So sometimes you can do that, but it's hard to get these things right when you miss one, you've actually missed at least 2. Because if you put that guy somewhere else, if somebody gets picked at 5 and you had them going at 8, well, you've already missed 2. And sometimes you miss 3 or more by missing that one, because there's sort of a chain reaction, right? That causes you to keep getting worse and worse. But it's not even about just getting the players right in the certain spots. It's about getting the idea of who those players are right at the spots that we have them at. Sometimes we have things going, we have players going places and people thinking about stuff, and those folks ain't even thinking about that position that we're sitting there talking about. Like, for instance, I keep my podcast yesterday, I was like, Osiris Torrance, come on down. Maybe the Jaguars say, you know what? Ben Barch has been doing really, really well in our offseason program, but we're going to touch it up and give him some competition. But we believe in him because we've had our hands on him now for a year. We're going to draft somebody, but it's going to be in the 3rd or 4th round for depth. We're going to take Andrew Voorhees. So we're not going to use that first pick on Osiris Torrance, and he's not even on our board, even if he falls to us. That may be what they're thinking, because they just might be on a whole nother plane. They might be on a whole nother level. They might be thinking like, yeah, we got Evan Ingram, but we need 2 tight ends. You know what we're going to do? Man, can you imagine having Darnell Washington on this team? Blocking people, knocking people off their line, getting to the red zone, hitting the seam, clearing things out for Evan Ingram to make a sort of a waggle and come across the front. You never know. Doug Peterson and that crew might be going, oh, you need to get me Darnell. Get me Darnell. If that's what they're doing, then this throws everything for a loop. Believe it or not, coaches do fall in love with players. They do. There's somebody over there that has a man crush on somebody, that none of us are even thinking about. None of us. Somebody, they might be sitting over there saying, we're not going to get a corner to play the slot. We're going to get Sidney Brown, and we're going to take him at the end of the first round, and we're going to shock the whole world. But that's the dude we want roaming back there with Cisco and Jenkins. That's who we want. We want a ball player like that. They very well might be doing that. You never, ever, ever know. All I can tell you is, with surprises, I hope they get it right. Now, the Jaguars, I said when they hit the lotto and got the right to draft Trevor Lawrence, I said they have a shot that if they do this correctly and if they do this the right way, they have a shot to be seriously special. Now, they may not have hit a home run in their first draft, the one when you know who was the coach, but if it ain't a home run, they hit a 2 RBI triple because the Trevor Lawrence, Travis Etienne, Tyson Campbell, Andre Cisco draft looks pretty good to me. All right. And Walker Little, who might be one of your starting tackles this year and who's an ascending player who has value, positional value, because I think he's also improved a lot. Yeah. Like I said, if it's not a home run, it's a 2 RBI triple because that was a hell of a draft. Too early to tell about last year where they used a lot on defense. But what they did go out and do is they got guys that folks believe, at least in Trayvon Walker's situation, that he'll be a lot better in year 2 and year 3 than he was in year 1. Everybody's talking about sacks. Well, folks are talking about Nolan Smith now. Well, Nolan Smith had 7.5 sacks in those same 3 years that Trayvon had 9.5. So when you try to tell people it was the scheme, they go, I don't want to hear that. We just want a guy to get to the quarterback. Now, those who watch tape will tell you that while he was explosive, he did not disengage a lot in college, that he battled that guy. So it showed up to be true last year. He has a lot of work to do as an individual pass rusher, but he's also very, very athletic, and you can understand why the Jaguars picked him. There's something else to be said. There are a lot of guys that come into the NFL and don't get a lot of sacks right away, but end up getting those sacks later. So Trayvon is one of those guys who we believe will continue to develop and end up being a lot better down the line than he is now. So it's too early to really judge that draft, but I'd say they hit at least a stand-up double. At the very least, they hit a stand-up double so far in the draft because they did get guys who can start. They did get guys who've shown, even whether it was spread out a little bit, they've shown that they can play in the National Football League. I'm going to give you a quick look at somebody else, and I'm going to tell you why what you ask a player to do is so important. The Arizona Cardinals selected Hassan Reddick. It was a shock to everybody when they picked him, right? In the draft. His first 3 years in the National Football League, Hassan Reddick had 7.5 sacks. His last year with Arizona, he had 12.5. They didn't guarantee his 5th-year option. They didn't try to keep him. His next 2 years, he proceeds to get 27 sacks in 2 years. He had 16 last year. That's his third team. Are we going to call him a bust? You can't call a guy a bust that has 47 sacks in 6 years, but he didn't work out for Arizona. This is the same thing that I tell you about when I say, watch out, there may be surprises. They may take somebody that is totally off the rails. The key for me is to not be like Arizona. Sorry, Alex Clancy. They have to be able to retain and keep their good players, which is why I wanted them to re-sign Jawan Taylor. But this is why you can't judge, and this is talking about last year's draft. This is why you can't judge last year's draft based on 1 year. Because if I'd have told you in 2019, when coming into that season, Hassan Reddick only had 6.5 sacks. If I'd have told the Arizona fans, just don't worry about it, man. Just hold on. You know what? Just because he only started 5 games in 2019 when he had 1 sack. If I'd have told those people after that 3rd year when they didn't keep up with his or they didn't agree to his 5th-year option. Hold on, man. He's going to have 39 and a half sacks over the next 3 years. He's going to average 13 sacks a year over the next 3. They would have told me, boy, you crazy. Well, no, I wouldn't have been crazy. I would have been right? So having somebody stand up on the table for you, having someone that believes in you is really, really important. And all it takes is to have someone with influence in the scouting department to get into Trent Baalke's ear, and they could also take someone that you don't expect. And all I'm telling you is don't trip out and don't be angry when that person is not good early on. Now, is there cautious optimism? Should we be cautious, or should we think or assume that Trevor Lawrence and the Jaguars are going to take that next step and maybe play in the AFC Championship game next year, or perhaps even host a divisional? We'll talk about that in just a second here on Locked On Jaguars. All right, rolling along here in our third and final segment. Just a quick recap. We've talked about what the Jags are waiting for with Shaq Griffin. Just being patient. Should we suspect surprises in the draft? Always. We never get it right. And now, cautious optimism. Are we being too loud on social media? Are the fans really, really assuming that this is totally different from 2017 and this team is going to keep ascending and going in a positive direction? The answer is no, you're not being too optimistic, and you should not be cautious. And the reason why, 2 reasons. The main reason is Trevor Lawrence. The next main reason is Doug Peterson. I believe those 2 gives the Jaguar fan base something that they can hold on to, something that they can believe in. I believe it gives the Jaguars fan base a reason to be optimistic, because I believe that they are just that good at what they do, and they are not dependent on a whole bunch of other things. The offense is going to get better. They're going to be better. They're going to get more weapons. The guys are going to get more used to the system, and therefore everyone's going to have another year of learning in the system where they are really going to understand exactly what it is that is expected of them. In fact, they're going to know the offense like the back of their hand. And what do you know? Doug might even throw an extra wrinkle or 2 in because these guys picked up everything so good in the 1 year that he was here. By the end of the year, the Jaguars offense was clicking and they were ready to go. Now, imagine this, another offseason where nothing changes, no coaching, no turmoil changes, only additions. The addition of Calvin Ridley, who was reinstated yesterday, and all of those things. And we didn't do a big show on that because we anticipated and expected that was going to happen. But shout out to Calvin Ridley. Welcome to Jacksonville. Welcome to Duval. All of these things that you have to consider. I really do believe, there's no reason to have cautious optimism. Just be as boisterous as you want to be. Now, I wouldn't get arrogant with it because anything could happen. You know, the thing that we don't talk about on here where a guy's not available to play, if too many of those, or the one person that we don't want that to happen to. So this is football, it's a collision sport. So sometimes those things happen. That's the only thing I believe can change the fortune of this franchise. Not somebody having an attitude or things being combustible or guys not getting along. I don't think that's going to be anything like that's going to really, really affect this club moving forward. I think the reason why the Jaguars are so intent on running it back with their own people, with just making some additions, is because not only were they successful last year, not only did they pick most of these guys, here's the big one. It's because of the chemistry of the team. Sometimes, even if you have a player that's a little bit of a lesser player, if you already have a bird in the hand in terms of, man, he understands his role on the team and exactly what is required of him and how we want to work. He understands our workflow as an organization. Then sometimes it's just worth keeping your own people, man. I can't sit here and get mad at them for running it back when I'm a proponent of continuity, right? And I'm a proponent of keeping your guys together and not having to build a new team every year. So I'm just kind of old school, and I wanted to get back a little bit to, I want our guys to be the same group of guys, at least for a 5-year run where guys are together, so that we can never say that they didn't have a good, honest run because they never kept things together. We've always said that in the past. I want to get to a situation where we're not saying that we're actually giving them the benefit of the doubt, and we're also giving them the best chance to be successful, because having that chemistry and knowing the fact, you can't tell me, even when they add new people, Mahomes combined with Kelsey, not only are they great, but they're great together and they know each other. It's kind of like Keith Richards and Mick Jagger. No matter how old they get, they still have that chemistry that you just can't replace. All right, we'll have more on free agency and the draft and the franchise tag. If anything happens league-wide, I will let you know that affects the Jaguars. We'll definitely let you know that on tomorrow. Until then, make sure you join us again here for another edition of Locked On Jaguars, where it's your team every day. And we always thank you for making us your first listen.